Morgan Stanley is out with its second annual venture capital survey and report this morning, and it highlights the funding gap for female and multicultural entrepreneurs. It also offers VC firms pathways to try and diversify and maximize returns in their portfolios. Joining us right now with more on the report and the venture capital ecosystem is Carla Harris, Vice Chairman of Global Wealth Management and Head of the Multicultural Clients Study Group at Morgan Stanley. Carla, it's good to see you this morning. Obviously, a lot has happened over this last year. When you think of 2020 and all of the issues that have been thrown our way, everything from the pandemic to Black Lives Matter to, people kind of getting out there and seeing a very different world. How has that played out in the VC world? What has it meant?
Yes, and good morning, Becky, and great to see you as well. I'll tell you that despite how difficult this year has been, there are a few bright spots. And I would say one of the biggest ones that we talk about in the report is that because of the Black Lives Matters movement, there's 61% of the VCs who have now said that they are more aware of the funding gap and that it has motivated them to think more critically about it. More importantly, 75% have now said it is possible to have a portfolio that prioritizes multicultural and female entrepreneurs and do well. And the reason why this is so significant in my mind, Becky, is that if you go back 10 or 15 years ago in the ESG space, the big debate was, can you really do well and do good at the same time? And it took us a decade before people now realize that that is a great space to invest in and you can do quite well by doing good. And here is the same thing that started to happen on the back of what has transpired this year. So I thought there were a lot of bright spots out of this year's survey for sure.
Hey, Carla, it's one thing to say that you think that this is something that can be done. It's another to put your money where your mouth is. Have these VC funds actually started putting more money in those directions?
Fair point. And we've started to see a slight increase in the number of folks that have said, number one, that they've hired more people of color and women on their team, which, as you know, was part of our prescriptive advice in the first white paper. There's also a slight increase in the folks that have actually invested in the multicultural and female entrepreneurs. But more importantly, there is a more significant jump from 43% to 59% that are now saying they are looking at the performance of those companies that are founded by multicultural and female entrepreneurs in their portfolio. And they have found that they have actually returned better performance or at a minimum are on par with the rest of their portfolio, which is also significant because as you recall, I said, if you can see the data, if you can talk about the data, those who don't get it will hug the data. And the data is clearly underscoring the thesis that we put out a couple of years ago when you and I had this conversation.
Hey, Carla, what I've heard from other quarters is that small businesses, entrepreneurs who are either run by women or are minority-based, founded, have actually struggled quite a bit more during this pandemic. They've had tougher times. Is that what you've seen with the firms you've helped get funding to this point?
Well, I'll tell you, it's been a very different story with most of the firms that we have funded through the Multicultural Innovation Lab. And let's talk about why. There is no question there is carnage in the small business community, especially on the back of COVID-19. And a lot of these businesses are businesses that depend on foot traffic, that depend on consumers. And when you have a shelter-in-place protocol, people can't get out. That certainly does put a lot of pressure on these businesses, and many will close, no question about that. However, as you know, Becky, the companies that we are focused on in our lab are those that are tech-enabled. And what we, in fact, have seen is the resilience of these entrepreneurs. And many of these companies have pivoted, and many actually have benefited, especially those who are in the ed tech space, those who are in the healthcare space, those who are in the med tech space. So I would say that we have, again, seen the theme underscored about the resilience of these multicultural and female entrepreneurs. They've had to work harder to get there. And I would argue that their resilience muscle is quite strong, but no question about what you said about small businesses serving consumers. You're right about that.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.